Taking a look at some of the coordinator candidates the Bucs have spoken with so far, that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So the Bucs have completed 5 interviews with external candidates so far in their search for an offensive coordinator to replace Liam Cohen, as well as one internal candidate. This show, we are going to dive in to 3 of those external candidates that are all currently working under Sean McVay with the Los Angeles Rams. Now, full disclosure, right before I sat down to record this, Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds said that he believes it is down to Caley or internal candidate Josh Grizzard, but we're going to talk more about Grizzard tomorrow. So yeah, I'm not fully convinced that the Bucs are already narrowing the search down after just 6 interviews, but I could be wrong. I mean, there is a first time for everything, right? I kid, of course, but let's kick this one off with the favorite among Bucs fans on social media, Nick Caley, before talking about Dave Ragone and Nate Scheelhaase. So, who is Nick Caley? Caley began his coaching career in 2005 as a student assistant at John Carroll, then became a graduate assistant at Akron from 2006 to 2007. From there, he was an administrative assistant at Auburn in 2008, then a graduate assistant at Iowa State from 2009 to 2011. He got a bit of a bump in 2012 when he became the Eastern Illinois secondary coach. And then he jumped to Arkansas as a graduate assistant in 2013. He went back to being a secondary coach in 2014 for Florida Atlantic before entering the NFL ranks in 2015. That was when he joined the New England Patriots as an offensive assistant from 2015 to 2016. Then he became their tight ends coach from 2017 to 2019. In 2020, he was the tight ends and fullbacks coach before returning to just tight ends coach in 2022. Then in 2023, he joined Sean McVay in Los Angeles as the Rams tight ends coach. Then this past season, he added passing game coordinator duties to his job. So a lot of 1 or 2 year stays for much of his career until landing with the Patriots from 2015 to 2022. However, this is a guy that gained some incredible experience on some really impressive coaching staffs. Having been in New England, obviously, he worked with Gronk as their tight ends coach, but also worked under Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels on 2 Super Bowl winning teams. He goes from that Super Bowl winning staff to another that won a Super Bowl, though Caley was not with them when they won their Super Bowl, but joins a Super Bowl winning head coach in Los Angeles, where he was able to gain even more knowledge of operating an offense with Sean McVay. As a passing game coordinator, Caley's hand was firmly placed in the aerial attack with the Rams that finished 10th in the NFL this season, averaging 225.7 yards per game. Stafford threw for just over 3,700 yards, while Puka Nacua continued to impress. He came away with over 90 receiving yards per game. This passing offense could have been even more prolific had it not been for injuries that caused Nacua to miss 8 games and Cooper Kupp to miss 6. They did have a solid rushing attack with Kyren Williams coming up just 1 yard shy of 1,300 to go along with his 14 touchdowns, but injury certainly played into the fact that the Rams had no 1,000-yard receivers this season, with Nacua coming up just 10 yards shy. Stafford also only had 20 touchdown passes this season, which is less than half of Baker Mayfield's output with the Bucs. Only 8 interceptions, which is great, but those touchdown numbers would need to take a big leap in 2025 compared to what Stafford did in 2024. Tutu Atwell was the team's 3rd leading receiver with 562 yards. That's 14 fewer than Chris Godwin had in just 7 games, and Atwell played in all 17. The Rams' 2 leading receivers, Kupp and Nacua, combined for 1,700 yards, while the Bucs' top 2 receivers combined for 1,604. That was between Mike Evans and Cade Otton, who missed a combined 6 games. With a healthy Mike Evans, an emerging Jalen McMillan, and hopefully a returning Chris Godwin, this passing offense can certainly be far more prolific than the one that Caley was a part of in Los Angeles. Cade Otton alone had nearly doubled the receiving yards of all Rams tight ends combined. Not to mention, Bucky Irving was far better than Kyren Williams was in the run game. Yes, Bucky finished 177 yards behind Williams season total last year, but he ran the ball 109 fewer times than Kyren Williams did. He averaged almost 1.5 yards per carry more than Kyren did, and we know how effective that run game for the Bucs was and how much it opened up the passing game for Baker Mayfield as he's coming off of a 4,500-yard, 40-plus touchdown season. With Caley, you get an interesting mixture of 2 really good offenses, the McDaniels Patriots and the McVay Rams. This is a guy that has been around championship caliber teams, championship winning staffs, and guys that have had prolonged success in the NFL. Not only are the Bucs interested, but Caley has also interviewed with the Houston Texans, and some have named him as the favorite for the Texans job. He was connected to the New York Jets offensive coordinator job early on in the process after they hired Aaron Glenn, but things on that front seem to have cooled off after the Lions passing game coordinator Tanner Ingstrud was passed over for that Detroit Lions offensive coordinator job. Looks like he might be the one joining Glenn in New York. So that's one less team that the Bucs would potentially have to compete for Caley's services. All in all, I like the idea of bringing in a guy who has worked under 2 great head coaches as well as 2 really good offensive minds. Say what you will about Josh McDaniels and his head coaching failures, but that dude can run some really, really good offenses. We saw that for years and years. In New England, some guys are just better fit for coordinator jobs than they are head coaching jobs. McDaniels, I believe, falls in that category. So just because he failed as a head coach doesn't mean that he's not a great offensive coordinator and he's not someone that Caley would have learned a lot from coaching under. And I really like the idea of having both of those differing styles kind of meshed together in a Caley offense that would play really well in Tampa with all of the weapons that they have. So Nate Scheelhaase was a name that I haven't heard in a very, very long time, but he is getting looks as an offensive coordinator. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards, rushing touchdowns, receiving yards, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, and you're going to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't need to win to get the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, next on the list here is my University of Illinois quarterback legend, Nathan Scheelhaase. He is the Rams pass game specialist and offensive assistant. I call him a legend because he led the Illini to their first bowl win in over a decade back in 2010 when he replaced Juice Williams at quarterback, that same Juice Williams that beat Ohio State in Columbus and snapped their 3-season-long home win streak. Shout out Evan Klosky. But anyway, we're not here to talk about his on-field accomplishments, but obviously we are going to talk about his history. I feel that it's worth noting that former Bucs and Jets tight end, current St. Louis Battlehawks head coach Anthony Becht was on Tom Krasnicki's show on WDAE and was raving about Nathan Scheelhaase as an offensive coordinator prospect. So Scheelhaase got his coaching start, of course, with Illinois when he joined their football operations in 2015 as their running backs coach. From there, he was the Illini's offensive assistant from 2016 to 2017 before heading off to Iowa State in 2018 as their running backs coach. From 2019 to 2020, he switched over to their wide receivers coach. Then from 21 to 22, he was their running backs coach and wide receivers coach, as well as their run game coordinator. He became Iowa State's offensive coordinator in 2023, while also serving as quarterbacks coach. Then the NFL and Sean McVay came knocking in 2024, making him their offensive assistant and passing game specialist. As an offensive coordinator of Iowa State in 2023, the Cyclones averaged 364.9 yards per game, 245 passing yards per game, 119 rushing yards per game, and 26.2 points per game. They finished 7-5, 6-3 in the Big 12, including a huge road upset over the 19th ranked Kansas State Wildcats, 42-35 in the last game of the season before losing to Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. Scheelhaase in Los Angeles was what Sean McVay called the play drawer. Other guys to fill that role under McVay: Zach Robinson, who is now in Atlanta, Zach Taylor, the head coach of Cincinnati, and of course, Liam Cohen, now the head coach with the Jacksonville Jaguars. McVay started doing that job under Kyle Shanahan when he was in Washington, and he has believed that it's been a great learning tool for future coordinators and head coaches. It is not a job for the weak, the lazy, or the dumb. Scheelhaase draws up the play script on Tuesday so that the offensive game plan for the week can be presented to the offense at practice on Wednesday. It has led to a lot of very late nights for Scheelhaase on Tuesday nights, but he breaks down the concepts, the formations, other aspects of the game plan, and creates all of these visuals to present to the offense. This means that he has an encyclopedic vision of exactly what the team is going to run, why they're going to run it, and essentially a full window into the offensive brain of Sean McVay. We see how well that has panned out for other guys that have had that job. Taylor in Cincinnati, one of the best offenses in the NFL. Liam Cohen last year with the Bucs, one of the best offenses in the NFL and the only playoff team to be in the top 5 in passing and rushing in the NFL. Scheelhaase, even though he was an offensive coordinator, has taken a 1-year masterclass in the ability to create, relay, and execute opponent-specific game plans all season long under McVay. Zach Taylor, when he was asked about this play drawer position that he filled, said that it's a necessary evil, but it also helps prepare you to be a leader and a coach, because as the play drawer, you have all the other position coaches coming to you and having you go over certain things about the game plan in regards to their players. So outside of McVay, Scheelhaase has a better grasp on the weekly offensive game plan than any other coach in the building. To put it plainly, Scheelhaase has already filled the responsibilities of being an offensive coordinator at the NFL level without being the one to call the plays. However, he does have experience calling plays, so there is that. That's not something that Dave Canales had. That's not something that Liam Cohen had at the NFL level before the Bucs brought him in. And while Cohen and Canales were considered young coaches when the Bucs hired them at 38 and 41 respectively, Scheelhaase is only 34 years old. That seems to be a case of, if he's the guy, hiring a coordinator that won't be jetting off to be a head coach the very next season. He'll be 35 in November. So if he were to be hired as a head coach after the 2025 season, he would only be the 8th head coach hired that was 35 or younger in the last 3 decades. So I'm not saying it won't happen, but history would be on the Bucs side in that case. The other coaches were, of course, Sean McVay, who was just shy of 31 years old when he was hired and is still the youngest head coach hired in NFL history. Then you had Lane Kiffin with the Raiders, Raheem Morris with the Bucs, Josh McDaniels with the Broncos, Mike Tomlin with the Steelers, Eric Mangini with the Jets, and John Gruden with the Raiders. So it has been a 50% success rate thereabouts. You have Gruden, McVay, and Tomlin all worked out with their respective teams. Gruden, of course, went on to coach the Bucs after the Raiders, win a Super Bowl. And then Kiffin, Mangini, Morris, and McDaniels were all considered failures, with the longest tenure out of all of them being Raheem Morris and Eric Mangini, only getting 3 years apiece. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen. It's not a 100% lock that Scheelhaase wouldn't get hired away as a head coach if he was the Bucs offensive coordinator in 2025 and found big time success, but it is unlikely. And that may be a very intriguing thing for the Buccaneers, to be able to bring in a guy that has that kind of mind, that is studied under McVay, that had such an incredible grasp on what and why McVay was implementing what he was, and actually have him for more than just 1 year. But again, if you're hiring coordinators and they only stay with you a year before they go off to be a head coach, you're doing something right. One more West Coast candidate coming up on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll have a peace of mind of knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only on the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Wrapping things up here on a coordinator candidate deep dive episode of Locked On Bucs. And we have one more candidate from the Sean McVay tree out there in Los Angeles, and that's Dave Ragone. He is the Rams quarterbacks coach. He began coaching in 2010 following his playing career, which lasted from 2003 to 2007. So Ragone was the quarterbacks coach of the Hartford Cardinals in 2010 before joining the Titans as their wide receivers coach from 2011 to 2012, then served as their quarterbacks coach in 2013. Ragone joined the Washington Redskins in 2015 as an offensive quality control coach before heading off to Chicago. With the Bears, he was the quarterbacks coach from 2016 to 2019, then the passing game coordinator in 2020. From there, he was the Falcons offensive coordinator from 2021 to 2023, and most recently, the quarterbacks coach in Los Angeles last season. Here's the thing that's going to raise a little bit of a red flag for some members of Bucs Nation, and that is the offensive coordinator of the Falcons gig that he had from 2021 to 2023. So the Falcons were bottom 5 in total offense and averaged under 19 points per game in 2021. They were in the bottom quarter of the NFL in total offense with just over 21 points per game in 2022. And then they were 17th in total offense, but back under 19 points per game in 2023. The thing about those offenses were that Ragone wasn't the only, or he wasn't the one actually in charge of the offense. That was still Arthur Smith's offense, and he was the one calling the shots. So you can't fault Ragone too much for the struggles that the Falcons had from 2021 to 2023, whether that was improperly using Kyle Pitts or not giving Bijan Robinson the ball enough. Things of those nature, that was an Arthur Smith call, not a Ragone call. As quarterbacks coach in Los Angeles, he obviously had a big role in Stafford's play, which we did talk about a little bit earlier, but Stafford finished 13th in the NFL in yards to go along with the 20 touchdowns and the 8 interceptions that I mentioned in segment 1. But he also finished with a 65.8% completion percentage, which was 18th in the NFL with a minimum of 300 pass attempts. That's also a 5.5% drop from where Baker was last year. Again, Stafford doesn't have as many weapons as Baker does, and injuries played a big factor in what the Rams could do. But as you well know, injuries played a big role in the Bucs season as well, with Evans and Otten missing time and then Godwin playing just 7 games. Look, the Bucs certainly like looking at this Sean McVay coaching tree for candidates when it comes to offensive coaches, but I think between these 3, I would rank them Caley, Scheelhaase, and Ragone. But I think that Scheelhaase is the most interesting given the road that he's taken. He's had the same path as McVay, Taylor, Cohen, and Robinson. And I think that's one that it really carries a lot of weight. He's very young, and maybe he's going to be able to relate to some of the players on a different level than other coaches. I mean, he's barely older than Mike Evans and Sterling Shepard. But there's something to be said for being such a crucial part of the game planning and presentation each and every week. And we see the results of other guys that have done that job in the league now with all the different head coaches and successful offensive coordinators that were tasked with that job under Sean McVay. So I love the idea of that McDaniels-McVay hybrid offense that Caley could bring. But at the end of the day, there's a reason that they keep looking to guys that coached under McVay. And that's because he's a damn good head coach. And he's a brilliant offensive mind that passes that knowledge down to his assistants. Those guys tend to find success in the NFL. So when you take a look, I understand that Nick Caley has been in the league much longer. He's more experienced. He studied under McDaniels, under McVay, under Belichick, is probably a guy that's working his way up to becoming a head coach. All of that is very intriguing. If it wasn't, he wouldn't have been linked to the Jets job early on. He would not be interviewing for the Texans offensive coordinator position. At the same time, I do really like the idea of the road that Scheelhaase has traveled down, just because that particular, ladder that he has had to climb, that specific play drawer task that he was given under McVay, I think gives him an insight that not a lot of these offensive coordinators are going to have. When you're bringing in these candidates to interview, not all of these guys have done what Scheelhaase has already done in the league. Now, granted, Scheelhaase hasn't done some of the things that those guys have done. But when you look at those guys that performed that job for Sean McVay, every single one of them has had great success in the NFL because of the way it has molded their vision and their interpretation of opponent-specific offensive game plans. And that kind of experience, that kind of responsibility pays dividends. And for McVay to have picked that up with Washington under Kyle Shanahan and continue to pass that on, you can kind of look down the line and see which guys McVay has essentially handpicked as kind of the next big offensive coach, that he sees something in these guys, and that's why he gives them that job. and it has panned out every single time. I think that's what makes Scheelhaase so intriguing and so interesting. He's already interviewed for the Jaguars offensive coordinator job as well. So obviously Cohen knows the responsibilities of that job because he handled it and knows what that does for these coaches. And it makes Scheelhaase a very interesting offensive coordinator candidate. Added bonus, he did call plays for Iowa State. I realize, again, that year Iowa State finished 7-5, but they're in the Big 12. They're not a football powerhouse. They had some good games. They don't have 5-star recruits. They barely even probably have 1 or 2 4-star recruits. So that was a guy that did a lot with a little, had some marquee wins as the offensive coordinator in 2023. But at the end of the day, if Scheelhaase is the guy, I think it could be a really, really exciting hire. I say all that to come back full circle and say Caley, I think, would, out of these 3 candidates, be best suited for the job this upcoming season. But I do think the risk is really high with Nick Caley that if you hire him, you may be looking at another one and done, because he is a guy that is a head coach in waiting. And if Bowles is going to stick around a few more years, that was apparently a hang up with Cohen, was that he didn't know the timeline of when he could potentially become the Bucs head coach. You could be in a situation where you're looking for yet another coordinator in 2026. Going to be doing more diving into the Bucs coordinator candidates on tomorrow's show as they've completed their first internal interview with Grizzard. We're going to talk about him as well as Grant Yudinsky and Marcus Brady, as long as there's no major breaking news regarding this offensive coordinator search. But that is going to do it for this episode. Let me know in the comments section which of these candidates from the Rams, these 3 candidates that we talked about on the show, let me know which ones you like the best and which one you would be the most excited for the Bucs to hire. Or, of course, you can let me know on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And of course, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.